Good morning, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. I hope you're doing very well today. Welcome to another theory video. This one is talking about the future of the BGx archetype. We're going to cover three major topics. The first one is going to be the current metagame, yes, but also one that we can project certain trends about into the future and whether certain cards' continued existence allow for the continued presence of BGx as a format pillar. Right now, it's fallen on some hard times. I don't even know if we can really call it a format pillar any longer. The second topic is going to be Unforeseen Synergies that we will cover the theory behind anyway. And the third topic will be new designs. What new designs specifically could ensure the continued viability of BGx as opposed to just broadly a disruptive deck or a black interactive deck or a mid-range deck, right? Specifically BGx, what will keep this relevant? So this is a donation video from Guillaume Udaye, and I am going to pass it over to him. We're going to kick off all of this analysis and theorizing by reading Guillaume's message to me. So thank you so much to you, my friend. Thank you to all Patreon supporters. Thanks for watching. Let's dive right in. What does the future of BGx hold? Alright guys, you're looking at a Gilded Goose and a Sword of Fire and Ice because last time Guillaume had me play a donation league or make a donation video, it was the Abzan Gooseblade, the notorious Gooseblade League. That was a fun one. It was really fun to brew. Really cool idea. And yeah, Guillaume says the following. I haven't played a lot of MTG in the past few months, to be honest. This is after I let him know he'd qualified for a donation video. We cannot play paper due to the virus, which is fair, and I'm not a massive fan of the modern format at the moment anyway. Guillaume, my friend, I completely agree. Personally, my motivation to play is very low. I'm having a lot more fun making these types of theory videos than I think I would be playing. I've played like one league in the past 3 weeks at this point. Really just looking at the metagame doesn't interest me, kind of feeling the same way I did in the Oko meta. Anyway, back to Guillaume, he says, I've been to the Discord a bit in the past week. I'm interested in the evolution of BGx. It seems like Rakdos is the way to go at the moment, with an aggressive approach, Scourge and Luris, or a more mid-range approach with Spyro and Channeler. This is probably due to the fact that Blood Moon is strong right now. Guillaume, you're completely correct about that, my friend. That's going to be a topic we springboard off of in the first segment of the video. Back to Guillaume, he says, anyway, I would love a video with your opinion on those topics. In a way, the situation of BGx variants sits at the moment and the evolution for the future, for example, if Uro and Field of the Dead are banned. I really wonder, for example, if we will reach a point where Jund is just not an option anymore. So many new cards drawing make the strategy harder, I think. You hate to hear it, you hate to agree with it, but it is definitely true. We do have to ask this question. That's what I'm here to do. We're going to ask it, we're going to try to answer it. And let's begin by looking at the metagame that Guillaume refers to. So did Guillaume nail it or what? Look at this top 10. We have 3 different Uro variants, including Uramnath at the very top, far and away the most powerful archetype, the most widely played archetype in Modern, and there are 2 other Uro variants, not even in the top 10, in the top 6. We have Sultai in 3rd, Temur in 6th, and then if you look at the decks around it, fleshing out the top 6, we have 2 Luris of the Dream Den decks, so this presence of a companion, just like Uro and Omnath and the supporting cast all drawing cards, or drawing multiple cards in some cases, and then you have the virtual 8-card starting hands of the 2 companion decks. Rakdos Midrange is the only non-fire deck, I guess, in the top 6, but it is very much a meta call. Rakdos was nowhere until Uro took over the meta. There's still big mana everywhere. There's still a ton of Uro, and Rakdos is main decking Blood Moon to really take advantage of that. So this is something I'd like to pause and reflect on, because basically we're looking at a situation where a mid-range deck needs to play Blood Moon to be competitive. There is no other mid-range here in this top 10. Rakdos Shadow does have some mid-rangey style play patterns, and you know, some people would call the Uro piles mid-rangey, at least to some degree, but when we're talking about traditional definitions, it's basically like, okay, you need to main deck a distinctly non-mid-rangey hate piece, again, if we're using historical definitions, in the form of Blood Moon. Otherwise, he can't do it. So BGx, this leaves us in the lurch because we are not a good Blood Moon deck, not compared to Rakdos, not compared to Gruul, not compared to other non-mid-range Blood Moon shells like the M. Hayashi Prowess deck or a Prison deck or anything. It's just like, yes, you could work your way around the idea of main decking Blood Moon and Jund, but why would you, right, when all these other viable alternative shells exist? You know, beyond that, we do have Blitz and Burn. We have some interesting targets for BGx Midrange, and if I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know what, these are the types of decks that we would like to see near the top of the meta for Rock to be a more viable choice, but that goes back to Guillaume's point. Is BGx viable as long as these types of design trends lead to this type of metagame? Well, I don't really think it is, and I hate to say it, it really pains me to say it, but look at these Uro decks and tell me you can justify playing BGx into a meta and do like a challenge where you know that, you know, probably 30% more of the decks that you see are going to be registering that card. And just to give you the full picture, look at the top 15, still no BGx. The top 20, still no BGx. We have to go down. Is this true? Is this really true? Yeah, 10, 15, 20, 25. You have to go down to 28th place to find a traditional BGx deck. Jund languishing at 1.1% of this metagame and nothing else, I'm sure, anywhere to be found. I see no Rock, I see no Abzan, I see no traditional old-fashioned Sultai mid-range. It is just not there. And if you look at the structure of BGx decks, relative to the meta we just saw, it is sadly no surprise. Thoughtseize, Liliana of the Veil, these represent the core iconic components of the black half of BGx. Now, Thoughtseize is still a very strong card, don't get me wrong. It's still a wonderful sideboard card in combo decks that can make black mana or in linear decks that can make black mana, and it's still an incredibly strong card if you are able to back it up with the main deck hate of Blood Moon in a Rakdos mid-range deck, which is, again, something that's not really viable for BGx relative to alternatives, or if you can use it as something that synergizes with your own game plan and punctures a hole in the opponent's game plan long enough to kill them, or long enough to really keep disrupting them while curving out efficiently in a more aggro-oriented way, as in the Rakdos Scourge deck. So these cards are still very strong. Liliana, I'm afraid to say, has seen better days. You know, people have been talking about the demise of Liliana for a long time. I have long maintained that she was still very good, that she was still underrated, but the 1-2 punch of Uro being everywhere and Companion being everywhere really, it's not really Companion, it's just Lurrus making the non-Uro decks able to compete in grindy situations with the Uro decks, basically. Anyway, Liliana of the Veil feels a little bit bad in a decent heuristic, not the whole story, but if Liliana feels bad, then really BGx midrange feels bad as well, relative to historic norms. And when you look at the green half of what historically constitutes BGx, it becomes very clear why that is. Tarmogoyf and Scavenging Ooze are probably the two most iconic green threats from the BGx midrange family, and notably, neither of them draw a card. There is no high floor on these cards anymore, just because the definition of what a high floor is has changed immensely. Now, what you get with these cards is different, but in neither case is really in keeping with current design. So in the case of Tarmogoyf, you get card quality. The classic idea with BGx is it is okay to trade 1-for-1 because when the dust settles or during the course of early turns while trading, you can slam a Tarmogoyf. It gives you a fast clock, and on average, it will significantly outshine the card quality of whatever your opponent is up to. That is no longer the case. Scourge of the Skyclaves is basically the new Tarmogoyf in that the shell it's in is more proactive, more resilient. It has a lower fail rate because it doesn't need to curve out as much with as many land drops, and also just therefore has a higher density of spells with a lower land count. And Scourge of the Skyclaves is also a higher ceiling card than Tarmogoyf. So Tarmogoyf, don't get me wrong, just like Thoughtseize, it is a very, very strong card still, but in terms of the shell around it in BGx, it is no longer reliably high floor or high ceiling enough to be one of the best things to be doing. Still viable, absolutely. But then if you look at Scavenging Ooze, this is another example of where the BGx strategy just feels like it is arguably the number one victim of F.I.R.E design, again, aside from formerly tier 2 or lower stuff like 8-rack. When you look at Scavenging Ooze, what do you see? You don't see a high floor immediately. It is a grizzly bear, and it's mana hungry, and all the rest, and gated by green mana specifically. But a seriously synergistic card with BGx, because with Scavenging Ooze, you want to be playing those Thought Seizes, you want to be playing those Fatal Pushes, you also need to make a ton of green mana, so what better shell than a BGx deck? Well, there really isn't one, but the problem with Scavenging Ooze is it only gets you virtual card advantage. You know, if you're gaining a little life here, getting a little bit bigger here, these incremental advantages all do add up. If you're disrupting the opponent's graveyard as well, even if they're not all in on it, these types of incremental advantages are exactly what define BGx. But the problem is when resource generation is so insane, when so many cards are just individually hyper powerful and have the very high floor of cantripping, Scavenging Ooze's incremental advantage begins to look a lot worse. And that leads us into one of Guillaume's questions. What would it look like if Uro and or Field of the Dead were banned? Well, this would be a great start toward restoring BGx to viability, simply because everything we just mentioned, we are less outclassed. We are less punished for not playing F.I.R.E design of our own. However, this is something that people have been calling for this for a long time. Will it actually happen? I don't know. Most people almost everybody, I think, wants either one or the other banned. I would say a majority probably would be happy if both were banned, but I don't have hard data on that, so take that for what it is worth. But here is my pessimism kicking in, my friends, even though one or both of these cards should absolutely be banned, and I guess at some point probably will be. I do wonder if we have kind of crossed the Rubicon anyway. I wonder if we have kind of entered into a new phase for so long. Certain things have gone so long without being corrected that a new normal has been established, despite probably the wishes of a majority of invested modern players. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's tab back over to the metagame to take a look. And this is what I want to show you guys. Look at this. Top cards overall played in Modern. This has been the case, I don't know, for many, many months. I want to say like a year. I could be wrong about that. I could be overestimating it. But Veil of Summer has been in the top 5, or indeed more often in the top 3 cards for at least the better part of a year. Now, it is a reactive, conditional color hoser. Despite that, it is simply like the third most played card in Modern and has been for a very long time. And this card does absolutely nothing but stymie interaction, punish you for playing traditional interaction like removal spells, discard spells, and permission spells. And I've beat the drum on Veil of Summer for a very, very long time. Most people, even though I said maybe speaking, on behalf of people I can't, but I'm pretty confident that the majority of people do want Uro and or Field of the Dead banned. I am no longer confident that most people want Veil of Summer banned, and that is what I mean about this being enshrined as the new normal, this type of design, this type of super high floor, punishing traditional interaction, paving the way for battle cruiser magic, Timmy magic, fire magic, whatever you want to call it. The bombs that just kind of technically don't win the game on the spot, but virtually win the game on the spot, at least if you are playing a traditional mid-range strategy against them. And I think in this case, Veil of Summer is a very significant bellwether. I think most people have accepted this as maybe a card that shouldn't have been printed, but one that people don't really expect to be banned. Now, I truly hope I'm wrong about this. I hope more people than I'm seeing lately are still on the Veil of Summer ban train. I hope that Wizards of the Coast does eventually decide that Modern has gone too far in these regards and that the older style of Magic is more preferable, but I do not think that is likely. I think even if Uro gets banned, for example, Veil of Summer will stay. And it's also true that Uro's complete dominance of the format is suppressing other Fire design cards that, while they might not oppress BGx Midrange as egregiously, as overwhelmingly as Uro does, they are still adding to that overall feel that the 1-for-1 followed by card quality or virtual card advantage as opposed to literal card advantage will not be a pillar of the format anymore without some other things happening. Now, just for the sake of completion, and for the sake of acknowledging facts, there are a lot of Fire cards that can be played in BGx, the type of cards that can break mid-range mirrors, right? And the type of cards that are overall very powerful, very high floor, and very high ceiling. That is the new trend. And Jund can play some of them. For example, you're looking at two of them, Seasoned Pyromancer and Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger. And to the extent that Jund is clinging into viability in a way near the bottom of the top 30, which again is just kind of insane that that's the highest BGx deck presence we have. It is largely on the back of these cards. And here's the problem. You know, it's great that Jund can play these, and they're good in Jund, don't get me wrong, but you are seeing the proof in the pudding. Jund is not the best home for these, and the BGx strategy is not the best home for these either. You look at Seasoned Pyromancer. Yes, it is a good card in Jund, but it pulls your mana in a direction where you need to make double red, and overall, there is some awkwardness. You know, you want Bloodbraid Elves in the deck still, so sometimes you'll have no choice but to kind of like pitch a Bloodbraid Elf to play a Spyro on curve just to do something, or because you're digging for the wrong half of you're digging for the right half of the deck rather. Compare that to how it plays in, for example, the Hayashi Prowess deck, right? Where Seasoned Pyromancer just helps you go wide, helps you refuel your hand. If you have a couple, maybe an occasional Dead Flame Slash or whatever, it can turn it into value. But really, you're dumping out your hand, you're doing something really proactive, really synergistic, and then you're just playing a Spyro when your hand is empty, refueling again. Same applies to Kroxa. Kroxa does Jund. Kroxa is definitely very, very good in Jund, but it is better in Rakdos. The mana is more easily accommodated in Rakdos, and Kroxa is along the Rakdos plan. Rakdos is definitely something that is more focused than Jund, and I said this on Patreon last month. We have to be focused as a mid-range deck, and Jund is kind of inherently unfocused relative to these other ones. And then both of the decks I just mentioned, on top of that, they can compete with Uro because they can play Blood Moon. Ditto, big mana decks, BGx, Jund specifically we're looking at now, does not have this luxury. So the problem that we have to resolve here with BGx is that Jund or Rock or whatever else will be able to sometimes play the Fire cards and they'll be good in there, but almost by definition, given the overall structure of BGx, there will be better homes for these cards. So if these cards are strong enough to play to displace the powerful cards already in Jund, well, maybe that is almost inherently self-defeating, right? Simply because they're inevitably going to have better homes elsewhere in more focused decks, and in decks that are not trying to play a strategy that increasingly is up against the odds relative to new design. So to conclude this first part of the video, my friends, an Uro plus 1 or 2 ban would be necessary, but probably not sufficient to restore BGx as a format pillar, simply because BGx with that virtual card advantage instead of the literal card advantage, and with cards like Liliana of the Veil, is best equipped to beat other cards that are not or other decks that are not drawing a ton of cards. You see a couple of them here. You see Blitz, you see Burn. There are other decks in the format like Ad Nauseam and so forth, where BGx really does shine relative to alternatives, but there is no reason to believe that Wizards will be printing more very powerful but low floor linear stuff, combo pieces. This is the type of design they're getting away from. Fire design shows us the future, and the future looks a little bit glum for BGx, even if we're just playing whack-a-mole with bans. And again, I don't think Veil of Summer anymore. I don't think it's likely to get banned, so where does that even by itself leave us, right? But all is not lost, because certain new printings could still specifically benefit BGx in a way that a generically playable Fire card does not. Let's dive a little bit into that. So the second point I'd like to raise here is the prospect of unforeseen synergies that specifically benefit BGx. There's a lot of decks out there, whether they're a combo deck or a tribal strategy, that are the proverbial one card away from being a real force, from being on the map. And with midrange, it's a little bit harder to really conceive of that, because as I just laid out, the whole problem with new Fire design is, even if it's playable in BGx, it is likely more playable in a more linear or hateful or focused deck than it is in the old-fashioned BGx style decks. But who the heck saw Valki, God of Lies / Tybalt Cosmic Imposter coming? Now, I'm not saying that this is going to make Jund tier 1 again. If you want my detailed thoughts on the card, I have already covered it in a separate video, and I'm a little agnostic in terms of how it will actually perform. But the reason I point this out here is simply because who could possibly have said, yes, what Jund needs to be competitive again? Let's just assume that Valki and Tybalt are a slam dunk in Jund. What Jund needs to be competitive again is a card that specifically kind of bends the rules around Cascade, but doesn't slot into the traditional Cascade shells as easily or as obviously, like Living End or, some other combo-oriented deck. Nope, this is a card that specifically wants to be played in a mid-rangey Bloodbraid Elf shell, but is also black, so doesn't just slot into Gruul mid-range, Obviously, this is a very narrow series of circumstances, a series of hoops that needed to be jumped through, but this is what happened. This is what we have. If Valki and Tybalt is a modern, viable thing to do, it is going to be Jund that is the best shell for it, and again, that is an unforeseen synergy. I won't really speculate too much more on this, but this is an important thing to say, that these unforeseen synergies, well, they're unforeseen, and anything can happen, and mid-range of the BGx variety does have enough unique characteristics, this Bloodbraid Elf example being one of them, that there are those types of things that can just kind of come out of nowhere and put the deck straight back on the map. Now, the final topic of this video is the prospect of new designs, and not new in the totally unforeseen way that Valki, God of Lies slots into Jund, but new in the sense of something that we could deliberately engineer that in a predictable way would boost BGx and other traditional mid-range decks in a way that the generically overpowered Fire cards that boost all kinds of decks wouldn't really do. You could also file unbannings under this category, and to that end, let's begin by looking at Deathrite Shaman. Now, a lot of people have said, Deathrite Shaman, that's what BGx needs to be put back on the map. I've even heard people say it's what Rock needs. And I understand that, because there's a subconscious, like you see the green-black. You know that Rock is a straight green-black deck. You know that Deathrite Shaman is so powerful that it's been banned in multiple formats. But I hate to say, it would not benefit Rock, because one of the major reasons Deathrite Shaman is so powerful or so homogenizing is because it can fit in a wide variety of decks. It can be cast off of a single swamp, which is really a color pie break and a homogenizing factor all in one. And the fact that it makes rainbow mono with this first activated ability is something that actively rewards 3 and even 4 color decks more than it rewards a clean, inconsistent 2-color deck like Rock. So between the near universal playability of this card and the fact that it is still probably too powerful for Modern, although these days I'm not even completely sure of that anymore, and the fact that it wouldn't specifically boost BGx, this is not likely, nor is it really the panacea that we should be hoping for. That said, a card like Deathrite Shaman could be exactly what Modern needs. You know, I'm, like I have said in my Modern Horizon speculation videos, I am not afraid of powerful cards. I think Modern is so powerful, it can absorb so many powerful cards. I am afraid of powerful cards with very high floors. I'm afraid of powerful cards that cannot fail. In the floor of Deathrite Shaman, you know, in the face of a Rest in Peace or something, it's just a 1-mana 1/2. That's not too high of a floor for me, right? So what could we look at that might be a fixed Deathrite Shaman to put BGx back where it needs to be in the meta? Well, how about this, my friends? I've mocked one up for you. How about Deathrite Mystic? Introducing Deathrite Mystic with this one weird trick. Or maybe with these 2 weird tricks. You get to make Deathrite Shaman more appropriate for Modern's power level and also less ubiquitous, less homogenizing, less of a color pie break. A couple very simple changes accomplish this. You can cast it only off of green mana, not the hybrid Golgari mana. That makes a world of difference in terms of which decks can freely accommodate it, and that alone is going to be a big hurdle to the homogenization fears that otherwise might rightly be held. And the other big change here is that the first activated ability no longer would make rainbow mana, but would make black or green. And this is not just an arbitrary, I like the Rock, therefore it's only going to be great in the Rock and no one else can have it. Like, this is still in keeping with the spirit of the card, which is a green-black card. And this is also an acknowledgement that color fixing, when it is too universal, when it is too powerful, really does tend to warp the format. We see this with the 4-color piles being viable, even in a meta where so many people are main decking Blood Moon. We even see 3 and occasionally 4-color piles playing Blood Moon themselves. Before that, we saw Arkham's Astrolabe completely warping the format, so we have to acknowledge that that rainbow mana, that extreme level of fixing is not good. But, you know, a powered-up Elvish Mystic, which is part of why I derived the name from Deathrite Shaman and Elvish Mystic, it is an Elf Shaman after all, is something that could make a lot of sense, both in terms of balance and theme, by making black or green mana. Now, I do acknowledge that this card is still very powerful. It's very possible that we should also tone down one of these other 2 abilities, possibly reworking them in a way, possibly making the life loss only lose 1 life for the opponent instead of 2. I don't know. I haven't play tested with this card, so I didn't want to get too far into the weeds, but I do make that caveat. And a fixed Deathrite Shaman, like this Deathrite Mystic proposal that I have here, is definitely something that could give BGx more of an identity. And unlike Scavenging Ooze, or I mean rather like Scavenging Ooze but more powerful, it's not just another card that draws a card. It is a card that gets you incremental virtual advantage instead of literal card advantage, and one that disrupts and interacts, and also is able to be interacted with. Let's remember that Deathrite Shaman itself, much less Deathrite Mystic, they die to Fatal Push, they get Thought Seized, they're not recursive, they're not, indestructible or something. They don't draw a card when they resolve. You can Firebolt it. You can Lightning Bolt it. You will be rewarded for doing so. This is the type of magic we want to encourage. This is the type of thing that could be a needed boost to BGx in a really unique way. Now, for another new design that could really specifically benefit BGx, let's return to our old friend, the Scavenging Ooze. Now, Scavenging Ooze is a card that most non-BGx decks wouldn't play. You will see it occasionally as a one of Court of Calling target, or maybe as a sideboard card in decks that can produce an absolute ton of green mana, but even that is a lot less common than it used to be, just because, again, the new designs really have pushed incremental advantage cards like this out. But that being said, Scavenging Ooze is still one of the core cards of Rock, at least, and Rock is the best Scavenging Ooze deck in the format. I've said this for a long time. It is because the type of interaction that BGx decks do really benefits the Skoos. We do disrupt well enough and in the types of ways to give Skoos time to get set up and to synergize with Skoos. We put things into the graveyard, Skoos eats things out of the graveyard. It's great. It makes up for the lack of exile effects in the deck to some degree. It's a very, very, very synergistic card. And specifically with Rock, there are very few decks that can produce green as plentifully and as painlessly while also synergizing with the black interaction as BG the Rock. That said, Scavenging Ooze is just not like a format-defining card, so what we would need in terms of new design is something that is almost a strictly better Skoos. And I will not subject you to another custom card for this, simply because I don't know what form it would take. It would be a little lazy to just, like, make a super-powered Skoos that does the same thing but better. I don't think that's what we want. But something that interacts, that synergizes rather with black interaction like removal and discard, and also rewards you for being flush with green mana, and also for playing a slower, more incremental game. The type of design space that Skoos occupies is the type of design space that BGx could exploit in a way that no other decks can. And again, to go back to that example, you see the contrast between what I'm saying here, I hope, and the other side of design where, yes, Jund can adopt Kroxa and Spyro, but in a less focused and less powerful way than other decks can. In a way that Skoos can be adapted by BGx, it's a little bit unique. So this type of design space, very, very interesting if we have strong hopes for the future. Another area of design, and I don't want this to happen, but that could happen, is Companion, and I don't like Companion. I love playing Lurrus decks, but I wish that Companion did not exist. I wish we were in an era where we didn't have to bring Companion, and we, to compete with other Companions or to compete with the Fire piles. I wish we were, frankly, in pre-2019 modern, but we are not. Companion is here to stay, it seems, and as strange as it seems and as on the nose as it would be, and as much as I wouldn't really like it, look at what the actual Companion rules text say. Look at all these restrictions. Your starting deck contains only cards with even converted mana cost. Each creature in your deck is a cat elemental. Blah, 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 blah. You guys get it. You guys know what Companion does and what it is like. There is no reason in theory that a Companion that was very powerful couldn't say your starting deck contains only black and green cards. Or I guess that would, you'd need to word it differently. I guess it would say your starting deck cannot contain red, blue, or white cards, for example. That would be a Rock Companion. And that would also take away a couple toys. You couldn't register Ashiok under those circumstances, for example. But the point here being is there are very on-the-nose ways. I didn't really want to explore them here because it's just very lazy design, and I don't want to be priced into playing a certain Companion to make a certain deck viable. I wish for the strategy overall to be viable, so that's why I spent a little bit more time talking about how to fix Deathrite Shaman and explore that type of design space occupied by Shaman and by Skoos. Types of decks are types of cards that really reward the BGx strategy as opposed to being generically powerful. Another way to kind of cheat around that, though, would be if some kind of Companion came out that put BGx Midrange back on the map and couldn't really be used by other archetypes, whether it's specific to Rock or something more broad. It's hard to say. You guys could use your imagination, but I wouldn't really hold out for it. Alright guys, so those were my thoughts on the present and the future of BGx. To summarize the video, the metagame right now is very hostile to BGx, and that, I'm afraid, is here to stay. It doesn't seem like they're in a terribly large hurry to ban the worst F.I.R.E, draw a card offenders, and even if they do, it feels like the community has grudgingly accepted a new normal in which the BGx strategy, as it currently exists, is unlikely to remain a pillar of the format. You know, you think back to when it was Jund Affinity in Twin. Jund was a true format pillar. I continue to think the deck will be playable. It's playable right now, really, but I don't think it will be a format pillar given the fact that we've entered a new era of design. I'm telling you, we'd need probably close to 10 bans to go back to the time when BGx would be a respectable candidate for like a consistent top 5 format policing format pillar. The reasons for that specifically afflicting BGx are the fact that F.I.R.E design really unwinds a lot of the good things about depletion, especially when you're looking to leverage incremental advantage, rather than depleting the opponent here and there with some discard spells to force your own linear plan through. And the Uro ban, therefore, a hypothetical Uro or Field of the Dead or both ban would be necessary but not sufficient to put BGx back into contention as a format pillar. Our hopes lie in two possibilities. Number one, the introduction of Unforeseen Synergies in the vein of Valky God of Lies, something that specifically BGx can leverage in a really unexpected way, in a way that could be described as broken. And that is definitely a part of what a new identity might need to incorporate. The other hope is that new printings push the existing F.I.R.E identity in a uniquely BGx way. And we covered that with the prospect of a slightly tweaked Deathrite Shaman or the prospect of a much higher powered Scavenging Ooze, or the prospect of cheating our way around intelligent design by just making a companion. That really gets it done. So there you go, my friends. Guillaume, I hope this was fun for you, my friend. I wish I had better news to impart. As you guys know who have viewed the channel, there have been times when Rock, or BGx in general, has not been much in the meta, and I have insisted that it is underrated. Right now, I think if a couple things change, for example, if we do get that Uro ban, maybe BGx doesn't become a format pillar, but I think Rock is a little underrated right now, and then Rock could really make a big surge relative to the virtual non-existence it has right now. So there's some of that going on, but overall, I think the prospect for BGx looking forward as a format pillar like it was 5 years ago looks pretty grim. You know, the Tarmogoyf Liliana of the Veil decks, they're not really like something that exists much in Legacy, right? So if we are increasingly powering up Modern, that doesn't necessarily have a divine right to exist in Modern either. So I will continue bringing you content just like this. If you have alternative hypotheses, my friends, please do leave them in the comments below. I could use a dose of optimism in this regard right now. And I do acknowledge that I'm only one guy. I could be missing something. I could be afflicted by biases right now. As I said near the beginning, I don't have a great desire to play. That's probably, at the moment, that's probably coloring my perception here at least a little bit as well. But I did try to be as analytical and objective here as possible. So Guillaume, my friend, once again, wish I had better news for you. But the Grim Flayers bringing the grim tidings. What else is new? I hope you enjoyed it anyway. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you, Guillaume, for your support. Thanks to all patrons, and I will see you next time. Let me know in the comments below what you think about all of this, and I hope you have a great day.